Hello and welcome back into yet another video on world history. Today we're going to be focusing on the Congress of Vienna, the aftermath of Napoleon's rise and fall on Europe. So what is the Congress of Vienna? Well, this is an event that is organized by the Austrian foreign minister at the time, Clemens von Metternich. And Metternich is, again, he's the foreign minister of Austria, but this is a meeting where you have basically the major powers uh, convene in Vienna to discuss and basically put back the pieces of Europe after Napoleon and the French Revolution. Now, Metternich was basically, he was someone that distrusted democracy. He did not think it was a system that could work in 19th century France or 19th century Europe as a whole, and sees Napoleon basically as the natural progression of these experiments. That if you're going to try democracy, eventually you're going to get mob rule, and then that mob rule is going to be punctuated with someone like Napoleon that comes along as a strongman and essentially destabilizes an entire continent, creates a continental war. And Metternich's plan at the Congress of Vienna really comes down to three things to restore power to Europe. And that is the containment of France, balancing power, and legitimacy. So, what does this really look like? Let's dig in a little deeper. So, again, Europe after the Congress of Vienna. What we see is the Austria and their foreign minister, they really tried to create a plan to basically put bubble wrap around France. The Austrian Netherlands and the Dutch Republic, they're put together to the point where they're called the Kingdom of the Netherlands. This will be the modern day Netherlands as well as what will be present day Belgium. There's 39 German states that are these kind of small principalities that are again ruled by princes that are put together as to what's called the German Confederation. It's a very loose grouping, but it's effectively controlled by the Austrians at this point. The Austrians have a huge empire, and the kind of German Confederation is somewhat a part of that at this point in time. We also see that Switzerland is fully recognized as an independent nation at this point, as well as the fact that the Kingdom of Sardinia gains territory, basically gaining its control back of the Piedmont region, as well as gaining Genoa, which is a really wealthy trading city, into the fold as well. And again, the goal here was really to try to contain France by surrounding it, preventing it from overpowering weaker nations. So we see this combination force taking place to basically try to put some bulwarks against French power in place. Now, here's the thing too, is that we want to see that things are balanced in Europe. And this is one of the big keys of the Congress of Vienna. They don't want to punish France because the fear is that if they punish France for what happened under Napoleon, that there's going to be a need. The French people are going to feel that they need revenge against the Austrians and the other European powers. They also didn't want to break up France into smaller countries because the thought was that, hey, if France doesn't exist on the continent, that might mean that other countries become more powerful. So again, if you're Britain or you're Sweden, you're looking at this and you say, oh, well, if France is broken up, do the Austrians then become the kind of big superpower of Europe? So what we see as a result of this basically is you have France that is still a major power in Europe, but is diminished in its power, that it's supposed to be a little bit more on the same playing field as other countries in Europe. And the other idea was that the other countries in Europe really wouldn't be in a better position to overpower each other either. And the last part of the Congress of Vienna comes down to what's known as legitimacy. Right? And legitimacy basically is this idea that the Congress of Vienna wants to make sure that legitimate monarchs are back in power so that we're not trying and we're not experimenting with new forms of government or trying to elect new leaders. What was broke should not be fixed in the eyes of the Congress of Vienna. What they want to see is they want to see as many deposed or monarchs that were kicked off the throne as possible reinstated. So, royal families in Spain, France, some of the Central European Confederacy, as well as some of the Italian states, we see them either regain their thrones or regain their territory. And the idea with this was basically, hey, we need to make sure that there's no bigger wars in Europe moving forward. And that if we have these monarchs in place, they'll keep things relatively stable. There won't be large conflict, and that things moving forward won't be that bad. Now, for the most part, we see that they were able to keep the peace. That basically, for the next century, with the exception of the Crimean War, there's not many wars where the powers of Europe are fighting against each other. That we see some small conflicts, but nothing on the scale of the wars that took place during the 1700s, and nothing in the case of um, the rise of Napoleon as well. Now, Vienna is a really important turning point. We can talk about it in terms of what it sets up for Europe, but it also sets up a pretty big chain of events globally. Vienna, make no mistake about it, though, is a conservative victory. At this point in time, when we're talking about conservatives, you're talking about people that are still big proponents of having a monarchy in place. And monarchy does continue to rule into the 20th century in a lot of places throughout Europe. There will be changes moving into this, but essentially you move into World War I with some of these monarchs in place. Now, France and Great Britain, they're constitutional monarchies, but you still have absolute rule in some places as well, such as Prussia, Russia, and Austria. We see that something also comes about. These alliances, this alliance system, or the concert of Europe, is something that keeps the peace in Europe and also deters any sort of revolution. That the way that the borders have been drawn, the way that these kingdoms have been set up, and the way that these kingdoms are supposed to work with each other basically prevents countries from trying to declare independence or unify for a good chunk of the early 1800s. Here's the thing, though, is that the genie is out of the bottle. Now, those at the Congress of Vienna, including Metternich, they think that they were able to stop democracy and democratic rule. Now, they are able to slow political progress, but they did not stop it. And what we see is that basically throughout much of the early 1800s, independence movements spark up in Latin America. These areas were previously colonies of places like Spain and France, Portugal, and they declared their independence against these empires and these monarchies because they've gotten a little bit of a taste of what independence and what freedom looks like. And while Latin America is kind of early to the jump here with this taking place in the early 1800s, by the mid to late 1800s, we see that some countries in Europe also are starting to form national identities and either unify or declare independence from these bigger empires. And that's really what we're looking at here moving forward is this long-term legacy. The next 100 years of European politics are very heavily influenced by what happens at the Congress of Vienna. France's power declines, but we see Great Britain and Prussia's rise moving into the 1900s. Nationalism, we'll talk about in another video, is this idea that starts to spread in places that are under foreign control, particularly in places like Germany and Greece and Italy. And again, the social views on what government is and the relationship that a government is supposed to have with its people is forever changed after the French Revolution, the rule of Napoleon, and effectively what happens at the Congress of Vienna.